My name's Michelle, and I was raised by my mom, Sarah, in a small apartment on the outskirts of town. Dad? He split when I was 3, leaving nothing but a fading memory and a whole lot of questions. Mom never spoke ill of him, but the hurt in her eyes whenever his name came up told me everything I needed to know. We had each other, and boy, did she work her ass off to make sure I had everything I needed. Double shifts, weekends, you name it. There were times I'd come home from school to find her passed out on the couch, still in her uniform, too exhausted to even make it to bed. That was our routine. Simple, sometimes tough, but full of love. I watched her sacrifice everything for me, and it lit a fire in my belly. I was gonna make something of myself, make her proud. So I hit the books hard. While other kids were out partying, I was knee-deep in textbooks. It paid off when I landed a scholarship to study economics at the state college. The day I got that acceptance letter, Mom cried. Happy tears, for once. You did it, baby, she said, hugging me tight. You're gonna go places, I just know it. College was an experience. For the first time, I was surrounded by kids who'd grown up with more than just the basics. It was a shock to the system, realizing how different my upbringing had been. But I didn't let it get to me. If anything, it made me work harder. I graduated with honors, my mom cheering louder than anyone else in the audience. As I walked across that stage, diploma in hand, I could see the pride shining in her eyes. All those years of hard work had paid off. But life was just getting started. With my shiny new degree, I landed a job as an economist at a big company in the city. It was time to spread my wings and fly. You call me every week, you hear? Mom said as she helped me pack up my beat-up car. And don't forget to eat your vegetables. I laughed, giving her one last hug. I promise, Mom, I'll make you proud. Life in the big city was a whirlwind. I threw myself into work, determined to prove my worth. Late nights, early mornings, endless spreadsheets, it was exhausting, but exhilarating. And it paid off. Just 2 years in, I landed a big promotion. Holy shit, Michelle, my colleague Jake exclaimed when I broke the news. We gotta celebrate. Drinks tonight, on me. I couldn't refuse. That evening, a bunch of us piled into Jake's favorite bar. The music was loud, the drinks were flowing, and for once, I let myself relax. That's when I saw him. Tall, dark-haired, with a smile that lit up the room. He was at the bar, and our eyes met over the rim of my glass. Before I knew it, he was making his way over. I'm Alex, he said, extending his hand. And you look like you're celebrating something. I grinned, riding high on my success and maybe one too many cocktails. I am, big promotion. I'm Michelle, by the way. We talked all night. Alex was charming, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. By the time we exchanged numbers, I was smitten. Our first date was a week later. Then another, and another. Before I knew it, 6 months had flown by, and I was head over heels. It was a crisp autumn evening when Alex got down on one knee. We were in the park where we'd had our third date, the trees around us a blaze of red and gold. As he slipped the ring on my finger, a gorgeous diamond that must have cost a fortune, I felt like I was living in a fairy tale. Little did I know, the story was about to take an unexpected turn. A week later, Alex announced it was time for me to meet his parents. They're excited to meet you, he said, but there was something off about his smile. I should have known something was up when we pulled into the driveway of a massive mansion. The perfectly manicured lawn, the gleaming luxury cars, this was old money, serious money. Your parents live here? I asked, my voice small. Alex just nodded, leading me to the front door. It swung open before we could knock, revealing an older couple who could have stepped out of a society magazine. Michelle, these are my parents, Richard and Genevieve, Alex said. They greeted me with polite smiles and, was that a French accent? The inside of the house was like a museum. Antique furniture, priceless art, and everywhere I looked, portraits. Stern-faced men and women in elaborate old-fashioned clothes stared down at me. Our ancestors, Genevieve said, noticing my gaze. All noble families from France. This one here, she pointed to a particularly dour-looking man, was a count in the royal court. I nodded, not knowing what to say. This was so far removed from my world, it felt like I'd stepped into another dimension. Shall we have dinner? Richard suggested, leading us to a dining room that could have seated 20. I sat down, staring at the array of silverware in front of me. Forks of different sizes, spoons I'd never seen before, it was like a metallic minefield. As the first course arrived, I froze. Which fork was I supposed to use? I glanced at Alex, panic rising in my throat. He subtly pointed to the outermost fork, and I grabbed it, feeling like a child in a grown-up's world. I could feel Richard and Genevieve's eyes on me, watching my every move. Their looks of barely concealed contempt made me want to sink into the floor. I'd never felt so out of place, so inadequate. As I fumbled through the meal, I couldn't help but think of my mom, of our tiny kitchen table where we'd eaten TV dinners and laughed about our days. As we moved on to the main course, Genevieve's piercing gaze locked onto me. So, Michelle, she began, her voice dripping with false sweetness, tell us about your family. What do your parents do? I swallowed hard, feeling my cheeks flush. Well, I was raised by my mother. She's a waitress. And your father? Richard chimed in, his eyebrow raised. He left when I was 3. I don't remember him, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, Genevieve's chair scraped against the floor as she abruptly stood up. This is unacceptable, she exclaimed, her accent thickening with anger. Alex, darling, you cannot be serious about this girl. I flinched at her words, feeling like I'd been slapped. Mother, please, Alex started, but Genevieve cut him off. We are from an ancient French family. We have a reputation to uphold. We cannot allow our only son to marry the first person he meets off the street, someone without pedigree or good origin. Richard nodded in agreement. Indeed, we expect our son to marry an equal, someone who knows their lineage back to at least the 7th generation. He turned to me, his eyes cold. Tell me, Michelle, can you name your great-grandfathers? I sat there, mouth agape, completely blindsided. I know my mom's parents' names, but beyond that. Richard rolled his eyes so hard I thought they might fall out of his head. As I suspected. No sense of heritage, no respect for lineage. That's enough. Alex's voice cut through the tension. Michelle is kind, intelligent, and hardworking. I love her, and I'm going to marry her. Your approval isn't required. I felt a surge of warmth at Alex's words, but it was quickly doused by Genevieve's icy reply. Oh, you'll marry her all right, she sneered. But only if she agrees to our conditions. Conditions? I echoed weakly. Richard leaned forward, his eyes boring into mine. If you're to be part of this family, you must learn to act like it. You will obey us, learn our ways, and do everything in your power to match our standing in society. Is that clear? I looked at Alex, hoping for some support, but he just nodded encouragingly. It's not so bad, Michelle. They just want what's best for us. My head was spinning. This wasn't how I imagined my engagement would go. But I loved Alex, and I wanted to make this work. So, against my better judgment, I nodded. I understand. I'll do my best. Genevieve's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Excellent. You can start by learning the history of our illustrious French lineage. It's important to know where you come from, after all. I bit back a retort. Where I came from was a loving home with a hard-working mother who'd sacrificed everything for me. But instead of saying that, I just nodded again. The weeks following that disastrous dinner flew by in a whirlwind of activity. Not content with just having me learn their family history, my future in-laws decided I needed a complete overhaul. Etiquette and style courses, Genevieve announced one day, handing me a stack of brochures. You'll need them if you're to fit in with our circle. So, on top of my full-time job, I found myself spending evenings and weekends at various classes. How to use 17 different types of forks. Check. The proper way to curtsy? Got it. The intricate steps of a waltz? I was on it. Back straight, chin up, the dance instructor would bark as I stumbled through yet another set of steps. A lady of society must always appear graceful. I'd come home exhausted, my feet blistered and my brain overloaded with rules and protocols. And then I'd open my wedding planner and realize I still had a million things to do. My phone buzzed. Mom again. I took a deep breath before answering. Hey, Mom, everything's great. I lied, forcing cheer into my voice. The wedding plans are coming along nicely. That's wonderful, sweetie, she said, and I could hear the pride in her voice. I can't wait to meet Alex and his family. Have you set up a dinner yet? I winced, remembering the conversation I'd had with Alex earlier that week. Hey, don't you think it's time you met my mom? I'd asked him as we were having coffee one morning. The wedding's getting closer, Anne. He'd waved me off, not even looking up from his phone. We'll meet at the wedding. It's fine. Now, on the phone with Mom, I swallowed hard. Not yet, Mom. Everyone's just so busy, you know? But soon, I promise. The next day, I broached the subject during another stilted family dinner. I was thinking, I began carefully, maybe we could all have dinner with my mother soon? She's really excited to meet you all. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, Genevieve let out a laugh that was more like a bark. And how exactly do you imagine this gathering? She asked, her voice dripping with disdain. Richard chimed in, his tone mockingly patient as if explaining something to a child. Michelle, surely you understand. We're from different social circles. We have no intention of socializing with a waitress. I felt my face flush with anger and shame. How dare they talk about my mother like that? She was worth 10 of them. I opened my mouth to retort, but Alex squeezed my hand under the table. Let it go, he whispered. Don't argue with them. It's not worth it. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. This wasn't right. None of this was right. But I loved Alex, didn't I? And this was the price of being with him. As I lay in bed that night, tossing and turning, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing myself. With every etiquette lesson, every dismissed suggestion, every lie to my mother, a little piece of Michelle, the real Michelle, was slipping away. The big day finally arrived. Months of planning, etiquette classes, and family history lessons had led to this moment. As I stood in the bridal suite, staring at my reflection in the full-length mirror, I barely recognized myself. The woman looking back at me was polished, poised, and perfect, everything Genevieve and Richard had demanded. You look beautiful, honey, Mom said, her eyes brimming with tears as she adjusted my veil. I'm so proud of you. I forced a smile, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. Thanks, Mom, I'm just nervous, I guess. She squeezed my hand. Everything will be fine, you'll see. If only she knew. The ceremony was a blur of faces, most of them strangers to me. Alex's side of the church was packed with what seemed like half the city's elite. Judges, politicians, CEOs, all there to witness the Delacroix heir tie the knot. My side, in comparison, looked pathetically small, just Mom and a handful of college friends. As soon as the reception started, I realized this wasn't going to be the joyous celebration I'd dreamed of. Genevieve and Richard were in their element, holding court at the main table, surrounded by their high society friends. And apparently, I was the entertainment. Michelle, darling, Genevieve called out, her voice sickly sweet. Be a dear and fetch us some more champagne and some of those little crab cakes. Chop chop. I stood there, frozen in disbelief. Was this really happening? On my wedding day? But it didn't stop there. For the next hour, I found myself running back and forth between tables, fetching drinks and snacks, all while trying not to trip over my long white dress. With each trip, I could feel the eyes of Alex's relatives on me, their whispers and snickers following me like a shadow. By the time I made it back to my seat, I was exhausted and on the verge of tears. Alex was nowhere to be found, probably off schmoozing with some important guest or another. It'll get better after the ceremony, I told myself. Once we say our vows, they'll have to treat me like family, right? But as if reading my mind, Genevieve's voice cut through the chatter of the reception. "Michelle," she called out, loud enough for half the room to hear. "As the new Delacroix daughter-in-law, it's your duty to serve our table for the entire evening. After all, the most important guests are seated here." I felt something snap inside me. Months of pent-up frustration and humiliation came bubbling to the surface. "No," I said, my voice shaking. "I will not. It's my wedding day, and there are waiters for that." The silence that fell over the room was deafening. Genevieve's face contorted with rage. "How dare you," she hissed. "You will do as you're told and know your place, you rootless little nobody. You have no right to contradict me, a woman of good breeding and pedigree." Fury and humiliation warred inside me as I stormed off to find Alex. I spotted him by the bar, laughing with a group of his college buddies, a half-empty champagne flute in his hand. "Alex," I hissed, grabbing his arm. "We need to talk. Now." He turned, his eyes slightly unfocused. "What's wrong, babe? Can't it wait?" "I'm in the middle of a story." I dragged him to a quiet corner, my hands shaking. "Your mother is treating me like a servant. On our wedding day. And you're here, drinking and laughing like everything's fine?" Alex's face darkened. "Are you serious right now? You're bothering me with this nonsense?" I stared at him, shocked. "Nonsense? Alex, they're humiliating me in front of everyone." He rolled his eyes, swaying slightly. "Oh, come on, just do what they ask. It's not a big deal. You should be grateful they're even accepting you into the family." "Grateful?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my voice. "Yeah, grateful," he sneered. "You think I didn't have other options? Prettier girls? Richer girls? Girls from good families? I chose you, Michelle. The least you could do is try to fit in." His words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. This man, this stranger in front of me, was not the Alex I thought I knew. Not the man I'd agreed to marry. "It's almost time for the ceremony," he said, checking his watch. "Pull yourself together and let's get this over with." As he walked away, I stood there, frozen. Tears welled up in my eyes, threatening to spill over. This was all wrong. Everything was wrong. "Michelle," Mom's voice cut through the fog of my thoughts. "Honey, what's wrong?" I turned to her, and the concern in her eyes broke the dam. Tears streamed down my face as she pulled me into a hug. "Oh, sweetie," she murmured, stroking my hair. "Talk to me. What's going on?" Between sobs, I poured out everything, the humiliation, Alex's words, the months of trying to change myself to fit into a world that clearly didn't want me. Mom listened, her face growing more serious with each word. When I finished, she held me at arm's length, looking me straight in the eye. "Michelle," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I need you to answer me honestly. Do you love Alex? Do you really want to marry him?" The question hung in the air between us. 6 months ago, I would have answered without hesitation. But now, I shook my head slowly, the realization dawning on me with crystal clarity. "No," I whispered. "No, I don't." Mom nodded, a determined look crossing her face. "Then it's time we put an end to this farce." Before I could ask what she meant, she marched over to the DJ's booth and grabbed the microphone. The feedback screeched through the speakers, causing everyone to wince and turn towards her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mom's voice rang out, clear and strong. "I apologize for the interruption, but I have an important announcement to make. A little secret, if you will." Mom's eyes locked onto Genevieve and Richard, who were frozen in their seats, champagne flutes halfway to their lips. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. "Genevieve, Richard," Mom said, her voice carrying easily through the silent room. Or should I say, Jenny and Rick? Genevieve's face went pale, while Richard's turned an alarming shade of red. "What are you talking about?" Genevieve spluttered, her carefully cultivated French accent slipping. Mom's laugh was cold and hard. "Oh, come on, Jenny. Don't you recognize me? Sarah Thompson, from good old Millbrook High? Class of '85? Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. "That's right, folks," Mom continued, warming to her subject. "Your hosts tonight, the oh so noble Delacroix? They're about as French as apple pie. Jenny here was my classmate in our little backwater town." "And Richard?" "He was the boy from the wrong side of the tracks who lived next door to us." I watched in fascination as Genevieve and Richard seemed to shrink in their seats, their carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. "I recognized them as soon as I heard their voices," Mom said, throwing me a wink. "Though I must say, that fancy French accent is new. Must have picked that up when the three of us moved to the big city to make it big." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Funny how things turn out, isn't it? I stayed true to myself, remained an ordinary woman. But Jenny and Rick here? They reinvented themselves as French nobility." The room erupted in shocked whispers and disbelieving laughter. I could see realization dawning on the faces of the guests, the truth behind the Delacroix family's carefully crafted image. "And you know what the kicker is?" Mom's voice cut through the chaos. "These people, who invented their entire backstory, who lied about their origins to climb the social ladder, they have the audacity to look down on my daughter. To humiliate her and treat her like she's beneath them." She turned to face the crowd, her eyes blazing. "Well, I'm here to tell you, there's nothing noble about lying. There's nothing elite about treating people like dirt. The only thing beneath anyone here is the behavior of those who claim to be better than the rest of us." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, people began to turn towards Genevieve and Richard. The looks of admiration and respect from earlier were gone, replaced by contempt and disgust. Genevieve and Richard, their carefully constructed personas shattered, began sputtering explanations, their fake French accents slipping away with each desperate word. "It's not what you think," Genevieve cried, her voice pure Midwest twang now. "We just wanted to give our son a better life." Richard chimed in, his own accent more trailer park than Champs-Élysées. "You don't understand the pressure of high society." Their pleas fell on deaf ears as the guests, many of whom had fawned over the Delacroix family for years, turned away in disgust. Years of lies and pretension came crashing down around them. Amidst the uproar, Alex stormed over to me, his face contorted with rage. "You," he spat, pointing an accusing finger. "You've ruined everything. My life, my family's reputation, it's all destroyed because of you." I stared at him, this man I thought I'd loved, and felt nothing. No pain, no regret, just a profound sense of relief. Taking a deep breath, I turned to face the chaos of the reception. In that moment, I found a strength I didn't know I possessed. "Everyone, may I have your attention please?" My voice rang out clear and strong. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. "I have an announcement to make. There will be no wedding today." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd, but I pressed on. "I've realized that I made a mistake. I chose a man who was ashamed of my background, who expected me to change everything about myself to fit into his world. I regret that I almost married someone so shallow and deceitful." With that, I reached up and removed my veil, letting it fall to the floor. I looked at my mom, who was beaming with pride, and nodded. "Let's go home, Mom." The aftermath of that day was swift and merciless. The Delacroix family, once the toast of high society, became social pariahs overnight. Their carefully cultivated connections abandoned them, invitations dried up, and their so-called friends pretended they'd never heard of them. Last I heard, they'd been forced to sell their mansion and move to another city, hoping to start over where their lies hadn't caught up with them yet. As for me? Well, life has a funny way of working out. A few months after the wedding I met Jason. He's a teacher at a local high school, comes from a working-class family just like mine. On our first date, I told him everything about the Delacroix disaster. Instead of being put off, he laughed and said, "Sounds like you dodged a bullet there." We've been dating for a while now, taking things slow. His parents are salt-of-the-earth people who welcomed me with open arms. No etiquette lessons required, no family histories to memorize. Just genuine warmth and acceptance. I'm back at my old job, working hard and earning respect the honest way. Mom and I are closer than ever. She's my hero, my rock, and I make sure she knows it every day.